Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces, and we'll give a couple more minutes here and let folks get settled in. Just want to let you know as well that Ray Dawes is running late, and he plans to join us while the broadcast is in progress. So he sends his regards and says he'll join us momentarily. I do see David Natsaway is here, so Dave, good to see you.
Good morning, afternoon, whatever it is for you.
Yeah, it's morning somewhere. We know that.
And I'm right here, Steve. Good morning.
Yes, who was that?
Everybody, or good afternoon.
Ray, yeah. Ray, you did make it. Okay, well.
Ray, did you come down out of picking your piñon nuts?
Just for you, buddy. Just for you, nephew.
Thank you, Uncle. I know you. I know you got your stash.
Yeah, I'm only sharing it with myself.
Well, why don't we, Ray has made it, so that's great, Ray. Thanks for being here with us. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Wanted to welcome you all to another installment in the Native Veterans Resilience and Wellness Skills Series. Today we have a special guest that I'll introduce in a moment. And today's topic will be using Sweat Lodge to treat post-traumatic stress syndrome. We have our three veterans and part of our ATTC center here, our national center, Ray Daw, David Natsaway, and Sean Bear are our hosts and facilitators for this series. And we do have a guest speaker today that I'll introduce momentarily. My name is Steve Steiny. I'm one of the managers here. I'm broadcasting to you live from the University of Iowa campus here in Iowa City, Iowa, and really pleased to see and have everyone here with us today. I also have Ella Driscoll on the line with us. She will be assisting me and will be helping me monitor the chat, as well as posting a link to a short survey that we would ask everyone to complete before they log off today. So just a couple of introduction slides, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Ray, and then we will introduce our guest speaker. The American Indian Alaska Native ATTC, here I have a map sort of representing the different regions across the U.S. This series is brought to you by the National American Indian Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. We are part of the ATTC network, which also includes 10 regional centers, 5 international centers, and a network coordinating office in the National Hispanic Latino ATTC. This project is supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native ATTC or MHTTC, respectively. Following today's webinar and at the conclusion of our broadcast, as I said, Ella will be posting a link to our GIPRA survey. It's very short, only take you a few moments. this really will help us determine and gauge the satisfaction with the event, and this feedback is critical to our future work, and we value your opinion and would greatly appreciate your time in sharing your thoughts with us. As you know, many of you know, we've been using Zoom now for some time. You are muted during the presentation portion of the webinar today. Please use the chat feature as your primary means of asking questions or giving comments. And like I said, we will do our best to monitor those and address those as we go. And I think Dr. Einan and I talked about just trying to answer those as we go along. So, or we can maybe save some time at the end to address any questions that come up. So you can also unmute yourself and ask a question, or use the hand raising feature if you're familiar with that. So I want to introduce, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker today. And this on using Sweat Lodge in therapy. Dr. Shane Einan, who is a licensed psychologist. He is affiliated with the Haudenosaunee Seneca Bear Clan, and he served 14 years on active duty in the military as a psychologist. He achieved the rank of commander before returning to civilian practice. During this time in the military, he served on a faculty for the U.S. Navy's APA psychological intern at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. He deployed as a neuropsychologist with the Marine Corps to Afghanistan in 2010, serving at the UK's Trauma Center at Camp Bastion and Camp Leatherneck. During his military career, Dr. Einan developed programs for PTSD, suicide intervention, and traumatic brain injury. He is currently in private practice and works with Eduardo Duran in developing an independent branch of indigenous psychology as a separate field from the mainstream colonial settler psychology framework. He's also a researcher in historical trauma. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker today. And before we begin, Ray, would you like to offer a blessing and get us started off in the right way?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. I want to apologize for the background noise that you're hearing. I'm in a car and on the road, so I apologize for that. But کدا هجان شترا یندنا دنسینی کوه کدوم جنو یاتی کوه کی کدوم زیستو کوه.
We lost him. We lost you, Ray.
Yeah, he could have. But I felt what he needed to say.
Thank you, Ray.
For blessings for us on this learning opportunity.
Okay.
You're losing us, Ray.
Okay, I think with that,
I did the blessing. Sorry, I was shopping. Go ahead.
We caught part of it, Ray. Thank you. At this point, I think I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Einan, and he can proceed. So, Shane.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction, Steve. Appreciate it. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here today and inviting me. I don't know why you decided to invite me. I don't really have much to say. kind of a silly man. I don't have any power anymore now that I'm out of the military, not an officer. So, but I do have one freedom now. I have a freedom to speak freely, and I can speak freely about my experiences without being muzzled by Uncle Sam. So I can say what I believe and speak my truth, and hopefully that's a blessing to everybody and can help you to maybe, find some healing in PTSD through the Sweat Lodge ceremony, a very sacred ceremony. So I'll give you a little background. I was in the United States Navy. I was considered green side, which meant that I was at the Marine Corps most of the time. Deployed a number of times. I was sent in a lot of different places to help develop programs. One of the programs I helped develop was bringing Sweat Lodges to military installations for individuals suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to sort of twist everything and dump it on its head to start off with. PTSD is a natural reaction to an abnormal situation. Human beings, obviously, in my experience, are not meant to kill other human beings. And to do so causes an extreme spiritual injury to people. Without the proper preparation spiritually, going into a situation where you're killing other people, you are going to experience, from what I've seen and what I've lived through, you're going to experience spiritual entities that are going to attach to you. Now, mainstream psychology in the Euro-settler, Euro-American model that was practiced in the military was completely and utterly inadequate and unequipped to deal with this problem. It had no idea what to do. In my experience of 14 years on active duty as a psychologist with the military, there was one thing after another sent to us that was promoted like a marketing material of what was going to be the ultimate cure. We figured it out. We got it. We know what we're going to do now. These men who are suffering are going to not have suffering anymore, and their suffering will be relieved. We have these studies and all this empirical evidence, and we have our science showing that this works. And then you go down and you actually work in the trenches, and that's actually not working. And it's not doing anything, and in some cases it's making things worse. And then the psychiatrists have their medication bottles that they shake around. Like, these are scientific proven ways of making sure that the pain from PTSD goes away. They didn't work really well. And I use the word marketing because I found in my time in the military a lot of marketing was involved in selling these interventions to people. There's been a lot of evidence since my time in the military that's come out that's shown that there was a lot of data manipulation going on. People were more about branding things and making a name for themselves, very ego-based kind of way of going about trying to heal veterans. And of course, because it involved the Department of Defense, there is a high incentive to sell things to them and then roll that out, and this would be the cure-all. It came down the line to us, from CBT to prolonged exposure therapy. All these names came rolling out. Army resiliency training by Marty Seligman was going to make sure that the warriors were prepared before they went into battle to be able to keep their minds straight and handle the stress that they were going to be under. I saw with my own eyes was an abject failure. It did not do anything at all to help these men. We also have to talk about who joins the military and the population that joins the military. I had an old psychoanalyst, a very, very old psychoanalyst. He was actually not to name drop, but it was just a funny anecdote that he was Joe Biden's psychoanalyst in the Navy. And he had this funny saying. He said, no one joins the military because their life's going well. And you always have to remember that. I'm sure you get people that join up, in my experience, but you do find people that join up for the military because they're patriotic or they believe in doing some patriotic duty. But most of the time, it's, you're being recruited in the military and go into there because you're trying to get away from something and build a better life. And the recruitment builds that up and says it will take you away from whatever bad place you're in and make you a man, make you a woman, build you into an adult, and give you a good career, and your life afterwards will be peaches and cream. And then you go to war and find out that the military is a huge machine now that doesn't have a spiritual core to it, and it takes people that are coming from a damaged background and then damaging them more, and then giving them no spiritual food to feed upon in order to overcome some of the problems that they're dealing with and they're seeing. A lot of people in the military that I experienced, especially on the enlisted side of the house, they had already seen enough violence in their lives that had never been really addressed or taken care of. A lot of domestic abuse and violence from all across the country. So as it dawned on me that a lot of the things I was doing as a psychologist were actually not that helpful and sometimes harmful, I was reaching out to, let me take a step back. I started out by taking my Native American relatives that were coming to me for help as a psychologist, and one by one, I knew that the therapy we were doing was not going to be really helpful. I had to do administrative things to help cover them and then get them back to their nation, their tribe, in order for them to go to their medicine people to get healing, if they believed that that was the way that would be most helpful for them. So I had to jump through a bunch of hoops to do that. I had the power to do it, and I did it. I would create medical leave of absences and things like that for people to go back to Pine Ridge or go back to Navajo Nation and allow them to undergo healing there and then come back when they felt like they were strong enough to come back to duty. And I was proud that I was able to create that space as a doctor in the military for that to happen. So then we started talking about a few people talking about bringing sweat lodges onto the installations. The VA was having some of the same ideas. So we had a group of people that had just gone through really intense combat situations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they were spiritually demolished by these experiences, and psychologically, meaning both their emotional and their mental abilities, had been broken by what they had seen and what they had experienced. Some people fared well. Some people came back and it didn't hurt them that much, and we don't know why that is. Some people, it doesn't really bother them too much. But I don't think I've ever met a single individual that went through combat that wasn't altered by it in some profound and significant way. So bringing the sweat lodge to PTSD treatment, Native American communities across Turtle Island have known about this for a long time. That you have to prepare your warriors before they go to war, and then when they come back, they need a cleansing and purification ritual in order to take away the pain and the suffering and the stigma that comes with being a killer of people, in order to rejoin society and to go back and to fulfill your community roles that you had formerly fulfilled. Warfare was not a constant thing. It's a aberration that occurs every so often. Even in the United States military, it's not a constant state of combat. There are combat, and then there's a job you have to go back to when you come back to garrison. When you come back to your base that you're stationed at, you have to fulfill a job. And to be able to do that, you have to go through some type of cleansing ritual. My experience with sweat, and I'm not going to go into detail about it because I don't know who's on this call and I don't know everybody. So I'm not going to go into the great mysteries of what a sweat is, because it's been abused, it's being misused, it's being sold to people as a cure-all. I think sometimes people have good intentions. So I'm not going to describe the ceremonies in great detail. I'm going to describe them symbolically, psychologically, what they're doing, instead of actually going into technique and how you build a sweat lodge. And I don't want to go into all that because I don't think that's the right thing to do, and this isn't the right environment to talk about those kind of things. So bringing the sweat lodge was a natural sort of evolution of how things were going in my experience with the military, of finding a way to help people get past the injuries that they were experiencing spiritually in combat, and to get rid of the entities that they were bringing home with them that were attached to them that needed to be cleaned. And it made sense to start using sweat lodges as a method to do that, because that, no matter what nation you come from, if you've experienced a sweat lodge and you know about the sweat lodge ceremony, I start getting emotional when I talk about this, so you'll have to excuse me for a second. So going through that purification process has a profound effect on people. And using it made sense because I knew it had been refined over hundreds of thousands of years on Turtle Island. It's a technique that had been used and honed and crafted and handed down generation to generation to do exactly what the military was trying to do, and that was to heal people and make them whole again after they had been broken. The metaphors used in the sweat lodge are what's most important, I think, psychologically. The metaphors of explaining to the individual that has been injured why they have this sense of disorientation, grief, soul loss. You can use a bunch of different words, but the metaphors themselves are one component of a powerful medicine that helps the mind itself start to make sense of what's going on in a way that may not be rational to the scientific community and the colonial settler community, but it does make sense to the soul. It makes sense to the spirit of the individual that here is a way of understanding what has happened to me that I cannot explain and I cannot express verbally to other people. So the metaphor is the first part of the sweat lodge ceremony that is vitally psychologically important to the individual. It's only one component. There's many, many ingredients involved, but it's the person conducting the ceremony, the metaphors they use, and they've been taught to use through generation after generation of being passed down and apprenticeships under other people who ran the ceremonies and nippies and other kinds of sweat lodge ceremonies. They were taught how to frame the problem going on with the individual in a way that could speak directly to the heart. And that is of such crucial importance that it gets underestimated quite a bit, I think. And that's the first step of the healing process. So even when there were people that were, Caucasian that were going through sweat lodge ceremonies and they didn't understand the language specifically in the blessings, the explanation translated to them that was a metaphor for their experience started to resonate in a way that you couldn't really get in a psychotherapy session, or you couldn't get after years of talking about the experience. It was an aha moment that usually occurred. Somebody finally understands, and that understanding is generation after generation after generation passing on an understanding, so that it's a spiritual and an ancestral understanding of the process of a soul wounding that occurs from combat. Now, everything else about the Sweat Lodge ceremony itself is a complete metaphor. It's symbolic. If you just look at it and you just watch it, it's interesting. If you're an anthropologist, you're looking at it. But when you dig down into this, what each component is actually metaphorically referring to, a symbol, there is a profound psychological shift that can occur. When you start talking about grandfathers as stones, and you start talking about the lodge itself as symbolic of Mother Earth, and you start to enter into a different psychological space that allows for a person to get out of their heads and into their hearts much faster than they would in many other circumstances. And that's where the healing really has to take place, at the spirit level, at the heart level. The next part of the lodge, and like again, I'm not going to talk about the technical aspects of building one and making one, but what's important here is the process of repetition, the music, the chanting in the original languages, and then the process of the number of times you go through a sweat and how it builds up over time. It's a building to a crescendo and then a settling down again that occurs. So you're in the sweat, you're in complete darkness, it's hot, you start hearing, chanting, and you hear drum, and it starts to resonate with you at a different level that can't be talked about in psychology offices, because it's a completely spiritual experience. And what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to the spirit world in a way that most people can't experience in any other way. Now you're pouring on water of life, and you start using particular types of medicines in the water, and you put that on the hot stones. Each one of these is bringing forward a special psychological reaction that is symbolic. And I think it speaks to each individual's soul memory, their spiritual memory, their ancestral memory, and it awakens something in them. And throughout, no matter how many cycles you go through, if you do 4 or 7, whatever the prescribed number is for that sweat of cycles, each cycle, what it's doing is bringing you in contact with what Western psychologists would call numinous, or a spiritual experience. There is a great deal of information available that isn't, it's very credible information, that adding in the experience of direct contact with the numinous, with the spiritual, combined with psychological healing and comfort that occurs from bonding and attachment with another human being and human beings within the confined space of a sweat lodge, for instance, takes any kind of intervention you're trying to do psychologically and takes the power of that medicine and triples and doubles it to a level that really can't be explained by science. So you're taking the experience of an actual spirit that you encounter that isn't typically allowed to be encountered in the typical Western mindset that everybody's been brought up in. And if you have an experience like that and it's real to you and you feel that connection with oneness that occurs, it will alter your psychology in a way that you are open up again. Like the heart opens up again, and the process of taking away and purifying what is bad off of you and allowing that feeling of oneness to open you up again is the actual medicine itself, symbolically, that allows a psychological transformation of the individual. So that's what I think is occurring in Sweat Lodge, to try to explain it to psychologists that may be skeptical or may not understand why a sweat lodge, why that ritual, why that ceremony is so profoundly beneficial to individuals. Most of us who have gone through that ritual understand what it means and understand the experience, but articulating it into English words for a scientific community is damn near impossible. An interesting thing that I have looked at that's going on at Johns Hopkins is they're looking at something very similar going on, and I'm not comparing these in any ways. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm trying to show an analog, a similarity. People who take things like cybacillin in controlled doses while they're in a healing environment, a healing container, also they find in those experiences that those plant medicines create that feeling of oneness that is able to be curative of things like depression, anxiety, because it totally alters your point of view of where you are in the universe. It gives you a new foundation of looking at yourself and where you are in your scope of life. Your worldview alters. And is changed by that experience with spirit. And the gateway in the sweat lodge is completely different than it is by ingesting some type of material that has a similar type of analogous method of feeling and getting in touch with that oneness. Now, the thing I think about the sweat lodge that is really the last part of what is healing about it, and this is something that Native Americans, across, no matter what nation you go to across Turtle Island, understand and have understood for eons, is that putting the body into extremes, not hurting it, but taking it and elevating it and putting it under stress, but holding that person while they're under stress, creates and unfolds a new psychological reality for the person. I'm trying to explain this in a way, I hope I'm coming across the right way, but so in a sweat lodge, you're taking the body temperature and you're raising it to an extreme degree. So you're putting the body through an extreme situation. By doing so, you are creating an opening for the person while they're being supported by an elder and their compatriots to allow for a new psychological experience to happen because the body is in an extreme state. It's very carefully controlled, and it's very monitored and understood how to monitor it by the people that have apprenticed and trained in how to do that. But there are countless different examples throughout the traditions of Turtle Island of putting the body in extreme states in order to achieve an opening of the heart, an opening of the mind, and an opening of the person to the spirit realm. And it's not just Turtle Island. This has happened throughout the world. It's other people have figured this out, from Polynesia to Aboriginal peoples of what's now known as Australia. Even the Scandinavians in their old traditions had something very similar that they did with their saunas. If you go back and you look at the literature, what they were doing before Christianization, there was a very similar type of ritual that was happening. Now we just call it a sauna, and you just go in and you get hot and you sweat a little bit. But they actually had a whole ritual that was dedicated to spiritual entities in order to create the same kind of thing, the same kind of environment and spiritual opening that is created in a sweat lodge. So this is obviously something that is not just particular to Turtle Island and the people here. It's something that human beings have found out across the globe is a healing intervention that I think has been lost over time. We can talk about whys and the hows and historical trauma and colonization and how these things were, banned up until 1978 or 79 by the government, and how you could go to jail for even holding a sweat lodge up until the late 70s. I find it ironic now that, the VA has them going on in numerous locations throughout the country, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing I want to talk about to sort of end and then open up to questions is that there is a sort of risk that we have to be careful of with sweat lodge being used as a PTSD treatment. There is a lot to be protected in this. There's a lot of feelings involved with appropriation and taking things away from Native American people and then appropriating them inappropriately and without an understanding of the entire metaphysical and cosmological and spiritual understanding of what it all means, because they all go together. It's not like you could just take this thing. It's not a technique that can just be taken and applied. And this is something that has been a warning that's occurred because a number of Caucasian people have gone through the sweat lodge and then they try to do it on their own. Vets, they try to recreate the same situation. They're told not to, but they'll try it, and it's extremely dangerous. And you really have to have somebody knows what they're doing perform these types of ceremonies for people. And that's a hard thing to do, is to find somebody that's qualified and actually knows. They've apprenticed, they've been trained, they know the entire series of rituals that have to occur in the right order, how to protect people, and how to do every part of it in the correct way. Not everybody can actually do it and do it properly and do it with the right intentions. So there's a lot of danger involved, and also, any kind of healing, any kind of good medicine also comes with a dark side to it, and we have to acknowledge that and be very protective. And I want to make sure that I'm not coming across in this talk that this is all just a great thing and it should be used on every vet that has PTSD. I don't agree with that either. I think it's something that needs exploration, but it is the cultural and spiritual heritage of particular people and nations that through their grace and their goodness and their holiness are willing to share it with others. But we have to also, especially in a venue like this, I need to make it clear that it has to be very held in a sacred manner. And it can't be commodified. It cannot be treated as just something else. I can't go throwing away, I can't go out there today with all the vets and start throwing, the whole Eucharist at everybody and saying, you'll be fine if you just the Catholics would kill me for that. Here's some wine for you. It's the blood of Christ. You'll be all right. You can't do that. So I just want to make sure that point gets across to everybody. And I want to make sure that is a warning that is heard. So I'll end there. I don't know, if that made any sense. I'm not a good public speaker. I know that. I'm aware of it. I'm really kind of not a smart guy. I just come off like one because they said I was at one point. So I'll take some questions now. If you guys have any questions for me, any men or women in the audience want to ask me any questions, but I only take easy ones because I really can't handle the hard ones. And if I accidentally offended anybody, I apologize beforehand.
Doc, we've got a couple of questions coming in on the chat, but I would also encourage anyone who would like to voice a question or a comment to unmute yourself. But I have one question from Caroline Ramos. She said, have you found sweat lodges to be beneficial to those who are not American Indian or Alaskan Native?
Yes, I have. I found it to be beneficial. I think that the person running the lodge and the firekeeper and everyone involved in the setting up the lodge have to be it's screened very carefully who they're allowing in. I have seen it help other people besides just it's not just a Native American. It came from the Native American experience and their own medicine and their own ways of doing things, but it comes from a common human soul. So it's difficult for somebody who's not Native American to start seeing from that metaphysical point of view. It's a huge leap. I have seen people healed. I have seen people healed permanently from it that aren't Native American. But it's how much that they are willing to give of themselves in the ceremony that I think really counts for the most. I would say that. Does anybody else have anything?
I've got another comment that's come in just from Jim Weichel. He says, very true regarding the spiritual harm that could result, not to mention the danger of physical injury or death that could result from someone not qualified. Not sure if that's the right word, but to run an anipi. Yeah,
that's very true. There's been many deaths of people who have tried to commodify the anipi ceremony, or they try to commodify a sweat lodge, or try to bastardize a form of it into their own way. I mean, those idiots. They were using. I'm not going to get into the details, but you can't take something that you don't understand and just think you can sell it. It's like going to buy sweetgrass at Whole Foods Market. I could go buy it right now if I want to, but does it mean anything? This is even 10 times more dangerous because you can kill yourself doing this, and you can kill other people, which is even worse. You take this medicine and it can turn around, and if you don't treat it with the proper sacredness and respect, it will kill you. Like I said, I don't want to get into the details because I don't want anybody on this that doesn't. I don't know who's on this, so I don't want them to understand too much about he said that if I do this, I'll be all right. I don't want that kind of talk. The intention and holding this whole ceremony in a sense of holiness and sacredness is what really counts the most. And you can really screw it up if you try to start adding things like money and Western values to it. Okay. Anything else?
I've got another posted comment or maybe question from Willita Ross. She says, do Do you feel if someone is qualified, they can transfer bad energy to someone else?
I have to tease that question apart a little bit. So if someone is qualified,
I don't know if she maybe means not qualified. She meant not qualified.
oh, she meant not
Someone is
qualified.
not qualified, can they transfer bad energy?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. If you don't know what you're doing, if they're not qualified and they haven't, I mean, the apprenticeship to run a sweat is about, I mean, you don't put fixed numbers on these kinds of things, but it's generally 12 years as a firekeeper, as like a person who's apprenticing, to even get to the point where you can start to and you're watched and monitored and supervised. And you're talking to elders constantly about what you're experiencing and getting advice. So, yeah, you can not only kill people, but you're messing with spirits that can kill inside the actual sweat lodge, because you're trying to clear them off and clean them. And you could accidentally, not knowing, spiritually, on a spiritual level, they become projections. They can become like arrows that get directed at other people. And they want to go and attach to somebody.
Hey, Steve, I got a question.
Yeah.
So Shane, I was 20 years in the Navy myself. So,
well, how you doing, shipmate?
So you are smart in that sense that you were in the Navy as well. So
I don't know about that. I was smart. Yeah, I joined a branch. Yeah, but
So my question is, so when you got active duty personnel,
yeah,
going through this situation, do they come to you, or is it something that is it part of their out processing, or is it something that you suggest to them, or how does that happen?
My time in the Navy, so it depends at what stage of my time in the Navy as a psychologist, because I was enlisted for a little while too. And so the way it worked is it was a referral. So I ran at certain stages of my career. I actually ran you're talking about the extreme combat wounded Marines, especially, and corpsmen. I would refer them to people if I felt like that was the appropriate thing, or if somebody was coming to visit to run a sweat lodge on a base, I would select people that I thought. Then they would go talk to the individual holding the sweat, and so it was a vetting process.
Okay. So did you ever come across anybody that was, because there's a lot of natives that don't practice a lot the spiritual ways. So
right.
Is it something that you introduce to them, or?
Well, it would be felt out. It would be. So I follow. Eduardo Duran and I are good friends and colleagues and work together. So the way he taught me to do it and the way I do it is you just start to. It's a delicate topic, so you have to start to gradually get a feeling for the history of where did your family learn this and where did your family learn that and what do you do when you're feeling sick. So it's a very delicate, gradual process of starting to understand the worldview. Are they more of a Western worldview, more of the European settler worldview? Or are they sort of in the middle? And usually in private practice and in my time in the Navy, it was sort of I'm in the middle. They don't want to commit to one way or another. I know a little bit about that. I've been to ceremony. I did this, and I've gone through the motions. And Christianity is sort of, I understand it. I went to church. My aunt was a devout Christian. So it was sort of most of these, I think everybody that's indigenous to Turtle Island, they're sort of running on this razor thin middle ground all the time. Like, can't really fall into the ceremonial way of life too far because it can be a problem to do that for living with the rest of the world around you. And then if you commit too far to the Western way, you get sucked into all that bullshit, and then you're so, and then you're an apple, and you're rejected by both sides, and so I'm just speaking my truth. I don't know if I'm offending anybody, but
yeah.
So it's so with the active duty people, it was sort of like just teasing it out. Where'd you learn that? And the first part was like education. Like, well, where did that come from? Why did your dad beat you? Well, because his grandfather beat him. Well, where'd your grandfather learn that? Well, he was at resident school at Thomas Residential School. Huh. Did you ever hear any stories about what happened before the residential schools? How we handled discipline back before that? Oh, no. I don't know much about it. Well, here, let's talk about this. Why don't you talk to your great-grandmother who's still alive? Ask her about what it was like before. And then you start opening the mind up and learning, instead of being in denial and repressing a lot of this stuff, like opening the person up to exploring and really understanding where a lot of this stuff comes from. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, yeah. That's great. Because, when I'm working out at the Pueblo of Laguna in New Mexico, so with the Pueblos, the sweat is not a part of the practice, but there are other healing ceremonies. So when at the agency, it's one of those things that the cultural side of it, we don't, there's no way to prescribe, or it has to come from the family. Mm-hmm. So we kind of stay away from that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, but just in the way I feel and my gut, and when I'm talking to somebody, I kind of see that would be beneficial for them, but I can't tell them,
No, you can't.
Yeah.
No, you can't, but you can also talk to their family.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
You could have a family session. If you're going to be like, you're going to talk to your boss, like, I think we need to have a family session. And then open up the discussion that way, I would think, would be a good way to go about it.
Well,
yeah.
Also, you need to consider is that even within certain tribes or certain families, whatever it might be, they use healers from outside the tribe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If they do, and then you go by those old practices and teachings, is that when you go somewhere else, you don't tell them how to run it or how to do this or that. You go and you follow their way, because that's the way they've been taught, and that you follow that and have that faith and trust in those holy people. But at the same time, it's like with the sweat lodge too, it's not just heat that helps you. I mean, over time, the more you learn with spirituality and medicine, healing and spirits, and you walk that journey, the more spirits that you gain over time, depending upon what you have learned and what path they have set you on. And a lot of times, that's the way those sweats are kind of run, in a sense, is those spirits that are with you. And you need to be able to control those, in a sense, because they're the ones who's going to be, in a sense, your protection there. Because then you have like guidelines. But a lot of people, they forget that you have to make these kind of rules as well with those spirits. Because if you try to decide everything and you're saying, I'm the one who's helping people, then you. Because, I mean, there's so many more different things about learning with their sweat. It's not just about running it. There's so many different teachings about the wood, the stones, the fire, placement, how many rounds you're going to go, and what medicines you're going to use within there. And a lot of times it seems like the more you know what you have gathered within your medicine path, in a sense, the more things you have gained, the more you are able to do in that sweat.
Right.
A lot of people don't always understand it.
And Sean, I didn't want to go into all that because I'm a little bit skeptical of the audience, but you can do that.
Yeah. Well, you said it took 6 years, but and it takes a lot of time. I mean, it took me 10 years before I was ever able to run my own.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right about the spiritual guides and the spiritual entities that come to you and help you and give you the medicine for you to work with and teach you. But the other thing about, you were starting to go into a whole different direction, because when you start talking about that, you're dedicated at that point. You can't turn away anymore, and you have to go with your medicine bundle, and there's no turning back from it. So we're really getting into some deep stuff talking about these things. But I agree with you.
We are approaching the top of the hour. I have really enjoyed the questions. There's one more question, Doc.
Sure.
That came in. It says, have you heard, this is from Ella Driscoll here in our audience, have you heard of success with additional treatment programs alongside the sweat for PTSD, such as culturally adapted programs in Native communities?
Alongside sweat. Oh, that's actually a pretty large topic. I mean, you have to talk about each nation and each tribe, and it even comes down to each family, which spirits are actually involved, and if we're going to talk about it at that level. But adapting things, it's local to what is needed to that individual scenario, and you're not going to know until you're actually with that family and with that group of people. And so it's hard to say what other culturally adapted, because it can change from family to family, clan to clan, tribe to tribe, so much what is needed. 9 times out of 10, it's just truth telling. That's the core of what I have found. It's just starting to get the truth out of what's been repressed and what's been held underneath the surface, and allowing that space for that. If there's an adaptive thing, it's truth telling, just being able to tell truth and not keep things hidden, secret, and not talked about, but in a safe way and with good people.
Thank you, Doc. I know we promised you no hard questions, so sorry about that.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
I can teach you how to light a fire.
There's one other question, and then we'll wrap things up, and we'll try and end on a good way. Tamara James asks, do you know if any Native American case coordinators within the VA have any training or an awareness to assist in promoting cultural care?
Okay, I'll answer this question, and I'll have to get off it. Okay, so I was horned in and shoehorned into trying to work with the VA on this issue. Okay, and here's my take on it. It was utter bullshit, and that's my end of what I'm going to say about it. They wanted me to go in there and try to help them. First of all, I wasn't the guy to do it. I just looked good on paper. And there was a lot of situations that came up that told me I was on the wrong path trying to help the VA understand these things, because it wasn't gonna. I'm talking about events that Spirit was telling me this was not the right way to go. I used to carry with me in my medicine bundle a .45 caliber bullet that did not go off when a Marine tried to kill himself. He gave it to me to carry in my medicine bundle, and I carried it. And on the way to the airport to give a big talk at the VA to all the head honchos about this very topic, I was stopped by TSA and held. And I was in full dress uniform too. After that, I gave up. I knew something was off. And the conversations I had on phone and after that, it was all face. It was all just PR stuff for them. They didn't care. They really didn't care. They had bigger fish to fry. They were just that. I will not be. There might be somebody else can handle it, but I'm not going to help them be window dressing. Sorry if that's too much truth for anybody, but
Once again, we are at the top of the hour. I know you have a patient to see, Doc, so we'll let you go. Thank you so
thanks.
much, and
Yeah.
appreciate your time. And
I'm glad I could be here.
I wanted to ask if Doc Foster would take us out in a good way, from one native psychologist to another. Let's Doc, would you do the blessing for us?
Kamatakipi wopla tuka kaplami ateo kantanka unchimali chipelo. I give thanks for our chance to speak today. I'm a little bit older than Shane, and our hopefulness is strong. The Anipi is part of a circle of ceremony, and our belief is we're spiritual beings on a physical journey, and one of the things we like about the sweat is that it's holistic. It's holistic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it brings us back to a spiritual circle of healing. I'm going to close with a song. It is a closing song from the Inipi. So thank you all, and blessings to everybody. And my wife's going to join me behind. This is Dr. Becky Foster, another Foster. And she's not a veteran, but she's lived with a veteran many decades. Tunka unche un la pieo. Tunka unche un la pieo. Emita kuyelo wanikta cha lena chichuelo we. Tonka unche un la pieo, emita kuyelo wanikta cha lena chichuelo we. And we're going to sing one more song for not just for the veterans, but for everybody out there. And I know you guys think of this as a piercing song, but it's actually a doctoring song. Do sing it during the piercing round of. Way, way, oh, way, oh, way, way, I, way, oh, hey, ay, 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 way, ah, way, ay, way, oh, way, ay, ay. Way, ay, ah, way, ay, way, ay, oh, way, oh, way. Wakataka unchimalaye, wanita chale chamu, ay, 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 ay. Way, ay, ah, way, ay, way, oh, way, ay, ay. Way, ay, way, ay, way. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh, way, I, way, I, way, way, I, way, Ataka unchimalaye, wanita chale chamu, hey, 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 way, Wanawaknikte chante shiche ya onchne doksa kiksu ya hewa onte. Haumatakuyas. Thank you all.
Matakiase, Doc. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll have another broadcast.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye, you guys.